Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here in It's a pleasure to be here in I'm sorry, I can't do it. I just can't do it. I can't do it. I went to the other school, and I just can't say it's a pleasure to be here in That's not going to happen. Last time I was here was in 1979 for, what's it called? The Wigwam, the Rumpus Room. What is that Gator Growl ripoff that you guys have up here? What's it? Powwow? Yeah, that's it. I was here for Powwow in 79. I saw Bill Cosby here, and then the Seminoles wiped us out. It comes and goes. Comes and goes. It'll come again, it'll go again. That's why life is interesting. And actually, it's interesting because we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Slade, thank you very much. It's one of the greatest introductions I've ever been given. One of these people is Barry Goldwater, one of these people is Ronald Reagan, and one of these people is Thomas Sowell, and one of them is Andrew Breitbart, and one of these people is not like the others. Those are terrific, great men, and it's an incredible honor, if an inaccurate one, to be mentioned in the same breath as those terrific people. We were talking about what we wanted to do. There's so much to talk about here, and I go around the country talking about all kinds of things, and I was telling Slade before we got started that anytime I hear from Americans for Prosperity, I always love to go to those events, and one of the reasons I like them the most is because I just like the name. I just think it's a great name. It just Americans for Prosperity. You could have a problem with that. So I was telling Slade, well, why don't we just talk about that? Why don't we just talk about Americans and prosperity? Why don't we just take a look at that and why these two things are so important? Who are Americans? What are we? Who are we? What are we made of? Why are we here? What's different about us, if anything? And what is prosperity? We talk about it like it's a force of nature, like it's the weather. Speaking of weather, but forgot how humid it is here. I was in a hotel with those. You guys ever have those low flow shower heads that don't even really put water on you, just kind of a mist? I turned the thing off and I couldn't tell if it was on or not. It's just like this perpetual kind of. Ugh. But let's talk about Americans and let's talk about prosperity, because the two are related. Americans make prosperity. That's what we do. If you have to ask for a definition of America, what an American is somebody who creates prosperity. The two are absolutely related, and they're related for important reasons. So let's see if we can figure out what some of those are tonight. America's obviously unique in a lot of ways, and one of the ways we're most unique, in fact, the only way really that we're unique, is that instead of us being based on a geographical location or on a race or an ethnicity or a tribe that has lived on a certain piece of ground for a long time, America is unique in the world in that America is the first nation that's ever founded on an idea. There's nothing else to America but the idea. And every one of us in this room and every one of us out there in the larger world come from all over the place. Come from all around the planet, come from every nation, every religion, every culture, every tribe in the world has sent somebody to come and live in America. That's amazing. It's amazing that people would come to live in a country that's based on an idea. And one of those ideas we're based on is prosperity, and we're going to come back to that. But that is what's so interesting about America to me, is that from the backgrounds of people, from where we're from and our backgrounds and what we bring to America, whether this generation or 2 generations ago or 10, we come from so much diversity, but our motivation is absolutely the same. That's absolutely astonishing. Because when you get right down to it, America is a collection of people who've come from all around the world because they had the same idea. They had the same motivation. They wanted to go someplace where they could be more or less be left alone so that they could live their own lives according to the way they wanted to. They wanted to be individuals. And so everything we see out in America today, all the things that we find so disturbing, things like Obamacare and Common Core, why do these things just hit us? Why do they just kind of, it's like a knife between the ribs? It's because ultimately it's a lack of individuality, right? Ultimately, it's Washington saying, no, everything's going to be the same and we're going to tell you what that is. And every single person that came to America at some point or another came here to get away from that nonsense. The simplest property, from a cell phone to a hoodie, property is what distinguishes you from the rest of the masses. Property is the badge of your individuality, and it doesn't matter how much property you have. All of the property that you acquire is property that you own. It separates you. It's a wall that protects you from the king. because subjects and slaves don't have property, but free people do. Individuals have property. They get to choose what kind of clothes they wear. They get to choose what kind of house they live in. They get to choose what kind of car they want to drive. Property and individuality together make up this home for individuals called America, and that allows us to produce prosperity, which we'll get to in just a minute. So, the force that's blowing America apart is this diversity of opinion, and people condemn this. Wrong. It's a tremendous thing. It's great that we disagree. It's great. And as I've said to people when I'm talking about Common Core, instead of, just as an example, instead of having a federal standard for all 50 states, why don't we just implement Common Core in Massachusetts, which has got the best states in the union, and I don't know if it's still Mississippi, but let's say it's Mississippi, which is at the bottom. Now, if it turns out the Common Core is everything that they say it is, both of those schools, both the bottom and the top, will both do better, right? Fantastic. Then we can adopt it on a per-case basis. But if it doesn't work, we're not subjecting the entire nation to this idiotic idea. And here's what's so beautiful about disagreeing. I happen to disagree with Common Core. I think Common Core as a curriculum is awful. I think it's just terrible. I think it's badly written, and I think it just stinks. But, what if we did it? And what if Massachusetts and Mississippi both did better? Well, it turned out they'd be right. And then everybody would win. We'd find out through competition. We'd get to the truth. And that's what the reactor of creativity provides for us. It provides for us a pathway to an achievable, knowable, external truth. That's what competition and disagreement do. I think A, you think B, which one's better? Let's try them both out. Hey, turns out it was A. If you have somebody commanding their opinion on you, as we have all throughout human history with emperors and kings and priests, we have no way of finding these things out, and we don't have any individuals either. So, what we need in our society is we need fluidity. We need for people with good ideas and no money to take those ideas into the marketplace and suddenly become rich. We'll get to that in a minute. But another thing that happens when you have a fluid society, and no one talks about this because the progressives love to demonize wealth, but you know what else happens when you have a very fluid society? Poor people become rich, and rich people become poor. I read a remarkable book called The Myth of the Robber Barons, that he looked at third and fourth generation, sometimes even second generation children of entrepreneurs, and more often than not, they simply dissipate out the family fortune. They just dissipate it away. Something very different between the grandson of Andrew Carnegie and Andrew Carnegie, something very, very different happens between the man that creates a fortune and the child that's born into a fortune. And that's one of the things I want to talk about today that's really new. Really new. Before I go on, I should say one other thing. I mentioned America as a reactor of creativity, forces that are in balance. This external force of difference of opinion wants to push America apart, wants to make it fly apart at the seams. What keeps America together? Well, traditionally, it's been the love of the country. It's been a common language, not a common culture, because we make our own culture. The Cubans came to America and added Cuban culture to the American mix. Now America's got Cuban culture in it. That's fantastic. But to the degree that it's the same language means it's the same country, it's the same flag, it's the same idea, it's the same gathering for the same reasons. And that's why conservatives like us are opposed to illegal immigration. We're not anti-immigrant, we love immigrants. But in order for America to work, we have to understand that the deal is, if you come here with this common motivation to be left alone and work hard, then you have to accept the part of the deal. You have to speak the language, you have to respect the flag, and you have to serve the country militarily in other forms. That's all we want. That's all we want. And for those people that say conservatives are anti-immigrant, I'm as conservative as they get nowadays, but I'm telling you something. If I could swap an immigrant from Somalia who wanted to come here and work hard, and in exchange I could send a Berkeley professor to go to Somalia and live for the rest of his life, and get some of that authentic third world socialism that they like so much, I would do that deal forever. I'd do that deal till we ran out of professors, then I'd do it till we ran out of liberals, and then I'd keep doing it. Because those people who want to come to America from Somalia and set up a dry cleaning factory, they're more American than the people who hate this country. Far more American. Take them in a heartbeat. So that's the force of gravity that keeps the country together. And they've been more or less in balance. But we're told by our social betters now that this collective force, this idea of one language, one culture, one agreement, one legal immigration, is wrong. And if that goes away, and we are no longer a culture, but a group of different cultures, then this whole thing just flies apart, and that's what they're trying to do. Because they would rather rule over the ruins than have a seat at the table of the most prosperous society in the history of the world. That's what these people are all about. We're going to get to that too. So that's America. Now, what makes us so unique? Why would somebody come here instead of stay home? We can go back to Europe, just for example. Why would somebody get on a boat 200-300 years ago, or 100 years ago, the Mayflower, whatever, doesn't matter what, and give up everything? Say goodbye to your family, say goodbye to your relatives, say goodbye to your friends, leave all your property at home, just carry with you the stuff that you can carry on your back, get in a boat, go someplace, you don't know where you're going to live, you don't know what the people are going to be, you don't know the name of the house, you don't have a job. Something is driving you so hard that you give up everything you believe, everything you have, to give it all up and go someplace just based on a desire. That's amazing. So, the one thing we know about Americans for prosperity is that Americans are selected. We self-selected ourselves from all around the world. We selected ourselves out, and we are risk takers. That's what's selected for evolutionarily in Americans is risk. Because it is a huge risk to leave everything and everyone you know and get on a boat and go someplace you've never been before, ever. It's a huge risk. How many of you today, I'm ashamed to admit that I'm one of you, but how many of you today look at what's happening to America and have started asking yourself, is there any place freer than this? Is there any place freer than this? Because if there is, I'm thinking about leaving. That's the genetic selection for risk that has provided the prosperity that this country has generated for the entire world. We're going to come back to that. So, I'm fascinated by this idea. Fascinated. I can't get enough of it. And I have looked at human history and individuals, and there's two questions that I have never been able to answer until now. One of the questions is, why is human history cyclical? Why? Why is it that if you look back through human history, you see civilizations taking 200-300 years to rise to full power, and then at that point where they've reached absolute supremacy, where they own all of the trade, where they've got the most powerful military, where their political influence is the greatest, when Greece and Rome and Egypt and Britain and Spain and France were at the height of their powers, it seemed like they should have gone right into orbit, that nothing could stop them. But again and again and again and again, when that society reaches that point of absolute prosperity, instead of going up, they just collapse overnight. Why? You could make a case it could happen once or twice, but why does it always happen? Why does it always happen the same way? I actually think I know why now. And the second thing that I couldn't understand is, why is it? We all have this experience. It's fun to joke about our liberal friends, but the truth is we know many, many, many brilliant, decent people who just have fundamentally different attitudes about everything than we do. Why do smart people disagree about something as fundamental as hard work, security, prosperity, capitalism? Why? Why do so many smart people believe in socialism when it's been shown to be a catastrophe everywhere it's been put into place? Why? Didn't make any sense to me. But now I know why. So you're going to have to bear with me a little bit. If you can stay awake with me through your dinner long enough, I'm telling you, you will leave here with a view of things that you've never had before. If you were in a maze trying to figure things out, you stick with me long enough, you're going to be above the maze looking down. I read a book called RK. It's the evolutionary history behind American political philosophy. So stick with me for 1 second here. As it turns out, if you have organisms, and these organisms are going to reproduce and pass their genes on to the next generation, that's all biology wants to do, is pass their genes on to the next generation. As it turns out, there are two strategies to succeed in doing this. One strategy is called the R strategy, little r. And R in an equation stands for reproductive rate. There's an equation that says how many bacteria, how many rabbits, how many wolves, how many people can fill up a space. And one of those variables is R, reproductive rate. All of the things being equal, those that reproduce the fastest will fill the space the most, and they'll succeed relative to the others, right? So that's R. The other defining characteristic is called K, capital K. K stands for the carrying capacity of the land, of the environment. How many organisms can it support? So that's K, all right? Now, it gets really, really interesting. An R-type species would be rabbits. Rabbits in an infinite plain of grass are R. Rabbits in a giant field of grass have more food, more resources than they could ever consume, and the smart play for a rabbit in a field of grass is to have as many children as they possibly can, as many offspring as they can, because it doesn't matter whether a rabbit can compete with other rabbits. There's food everywhere. If a stronger rabbit comes along, you just move over a foot and you just keep eating, right? R selects for non-competitiveness. If you're a rabbit fighting another rabbit, you're wasting your time. Because why fight another rabbit for food? Because if I hop 3 feet over to the right, it's all the grass I could possibly need. Competition is a waste of time if resources are endless. If resources are endless, then competition is a waste of time. Reproduction is the key. Invest as little in your children as possible. Have as many sexual encounters as you possibly can. Promiscuity is selected in R. And lack of competition is selected in R. And because rabbits in an endless field of grass don't fear 10 or 15 new rabbits coming in, what difference does it make if another 50 rabbits move onto the field? There's more grass than you could ever need, ever. Our selected species don't have a strong sense of in-group versus out-group. They don't see themselves as rabbits or as Americans or as anything else. They just see themselves as part of this giant thing of rabbits, and all can come as they want to, and the more the merrier. That's R. K is wolves. Wolves in the winter are a very heavily selected K species because there's not endless fields of rabbits to eat. In a K selection, food is very hard to come by. What does that mean? That means wolves have to be very competitive. That means that wolves will spend most of their childhood getting to be better wolves. That means that wolves will have very few children and invest in those children very heavily because they want those wolves to have sex as late as possible so they can mate with the best other wolves. And wolves will have all sorts of fights going on, and they'll have constant competitions to see which is the strongest and the fittest. That's a K-selected species. Wolves also function in packs. They're loyal to each other. They take care of their own. Wolves understand that if another pack of wolves comes into this territory, one of those packs is going to starve to death. So they're prepared to fight those other wolves if they have to. That's K. Now, if you had to pick between liberals and conservatives, which one would you say is more rabbit type R, which wants to consume resources endlessly, which has no sense of the in-group versus the out-group? And which one would you say, on the other hand, supports things like competition, capitalism, supply and demand? That guy runs a crappy dry cleaning service. I'm going to open a new one, and I'm going to steal his business. I'm going to take his lunch from him. That's K. Okay, that's K. We're the ones who have a sense of there are people out there in Iran and Russia and other stuff who don't like us, who want to hurt us, and we have to stick together and fight them. They're the ones who say, what difference does it make? What difference does it make? There's no threat out there. You're just scaring people. All of this stuff makes a certain kind of sense. And the reason the country is changing, my friends, and the reason we're so worried about what we see, is that we K-type conservatives have produced so much prosperity for so long that people are assuming that prosperity is just taken for granted. They're starting to think of the world not as a place where you have to go out and make something happen, but rather as a world of endless resources that'll be there forever, and all you have to do is just go take them, with no responsibilities at all, none. And societies collapse and civilizations fall because the K-selected competitors that generated all that wealth produce so much wealth that people just assume wealth is going to be there forever, and they take it out of the system, they don't put anything back, and down it goes. That's what's happening. That's what's happening. I'm not going to spend a whole lot more time on this, but just one thing that really lit me up. Do you ever wonder why liberals always seem to take the side of the enemy of the United States? Why liberals always took the side of the Soviets during the Cold War, and you heard them standing up for the Islamicists after 9/11? You ever wonder why liberals always seem to take the side of the criminal rather than the side of the law enforcement guy? You ever wonder why liberals are so much concerned about the rights of the criminal and not the rights of the victims? Does that ever caused me astonishment for my entire life. I couldn't figure it out. It didn't make any sense. Especially because liberals don't like guns. You would think since liberals are not willing to protect themselves, you'd think they'd be especially in favor of those people that protected them instead, right? The warriors. You'd think that the liberals would be in favor of our warriors because they're not willing to protect themselves, but they're not. They're not. They don't like our military, and they don't like our police forces. Well, RK explains that. What RK basically says is, the liberals have a very hard time externalizing threat. They don't see a pack of wolves as a problem. They don't see an external threat. What they do see is internal threats. They see people competing with them here in America, and they know they can't compete. So on some subconscious level, it's a subconscious thing, on some subconscious level, they sympathize with the enemy warriors because they're going to cull our warriors. They're going to take our warriors out of our gene pool. They sympathize with the criminals because criminals randomly pulling people out of society benefits the people that can reproduce the fastest. The one thing that liberals and this R philosophy cannot tolerate is that the K-type people would defend themselves. Because if Ks defend themselves with their own firearms, there's not going to be any Rs left. So long as criminals are pulling people out of the population randomly, that benefits R. But if Ks are able to defend themselves, then criminals don't prey on the Ks and just the Rs, and they're against all of this stuff. It all begins to make a certain kind of really weird and evil sense. And it's brutal because our society is becoming this R society. And we have to stop it. Because if we don't, we're going to fall into the same pit that every civilization ever has. And you know who gets hurt the worst? If this K society of honor and rules and laws collapses, it's the rabbits that get hurt. They can't protect themselves. They can't compete. They're the ones that get hurt. So we have to generate more prosperity. But we have to explain to them what prosperity is and why prosperity is not unlimited. It's not an open field of grass. So let's talk about prosperity real quick. What is prosperity? What does it mean? You're Americans for Prosperity. I consider myself an honorary member. Why are we in favor of prosperity? What is prosperity anyway?
Productivity.
Prosperity is productivity, but you have productivity for needs. Prosperity is extra resources. Prosperity, by definition, means you have more than you need. Prosperity means you have more than you need. And that's what makes everything worth living. Everything worth living. Because if you had to get up and hunt for the food that you ate that day, and the next day you had to get up and go out and hunt or gather the food you needed for that day, life would be pretty awful. Prosperity is what makes life fun. Prosperity is a car. Prosperity is nice clothes. Prosperity is all the things that make life worth living. We have to be able to defend prosperity, or we're going to lose prosperity to this biological process I just explained. So we can't just make more stuff, which is what we do. We have to explain why we're making stuff, and we have to explain how we're making stuff. And if we don't do that, we're going to lose. It's not even about policies in the State House. It's about explaining to people who maybe work for you how wealth generation works. So the question I would have for you is, as K-selected wolf-type herd, not pack-type people, a pack rather than a herd rather, can wealth be generated out of thin air, yes or no?
Yes.
Raise your hand if you think it can. Raise your hand if you think it can't. Sorry to disagree with you, people are wrong. Wealth can be generated out of thin air. It can. It can be generated out of thin air. I'm going to show you how. If I have an idea, maybe it's a movie screenplay, maybe it's a business plan for a dry cleaning company, anything, just an idea that I had, and I take the actions necessary to put that plan into effect. If there was an empty lot at the corner of the street, and through my hard work, my vision, and my ability to go out and convince other people to put some capital into something, if once where there was an empty lot, there is now a dry cleaning store, we have generated wealth out of thin air. Society's richer because there's a dry cleaning store there instead of an open lot. It's richer. There's more wealth. That's not money. Money is what we use to trade wealth. Wealth is generated out of thin air, just through creativity. But the real way we generate wealth is through trade. Nobody even thinks about this. This is what's so remarkable about the ability to generate wealth out of thin air. Because I have to tell you something, if you go back home and Google Los Angeles in 1863, you'll see a picture, and it's 4 or 5 adobe huts and a hitching post and a donkey. And I flew right over it on the way out here, and it's improved somewhat since then. So where did all this come from? Where did the Mercedes-Benzes come from? And where did the widescreen TVs come from? And where did the MRI machines come from? And the air conditioning come from? Where did all this stuff come from if it can't be generated out of thin air? We didn't send the Marines over to Djibouti to steal flat-screen TVs from the Djiboutians. We didn't take their flat-screen TVs. We generated it out of thin air. We made it out of nothing. We made it out of hard work. How does this happen? Well, the economy is so complex, let's take things very, very simple. Let's make them real simple so we can all understand it. Let's go back to prehistoric times, and let's say that we're a hunter tribe and we live up in the mountains. And because we live up in the mountains and we have to hunt, we depend on our spears. And since we depend on our spears, and since we make spears, our spears are terrific. They're solid, and they fly straight, and they've got stone spearheads, and we carve beautiful drawings into the side of them. They're fantastic spears. Now, down by the ocean lives a gatherer tribe. They don't get to hunt much, so their spears are kind of rickety sticks, but their baskets are woven tight enough to hold water. Up in the mountains, the baskets look like birds' nests. Now, one day, a guy from the hunter tribe meets a person from the gatherer tribe in the Midlands, and they look at each other and they say, well, that, sir, is the nicest spear I believe I've ever seen. And the other guy says, well, I have to admit, I have never seen a basket of that quality before either. So the guy from the hunter tribe says, I will trade you one of my excellent spears for one of your remarkable baskets. And they do, and both of them go home, and here's the miracle. Which one goes home wealthier? Both of them do. Both of them do. You go to McDonald's with $2 for a Happy Meal, you'd rather have the hamburger. McDonald's would rather have the $2. You both do better. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. But think about it. That guy from that hunter tribe who has these amazing spears comes back home with a basket that no one's ever seen before. And he walks through the town and makes a big deal out of it and shows the basket off. And maybe he'll say there'll be a private screening for the basket for the ladies at 11 o'clock tonight once the moon comes up over the mountains. And you can come in and I'll show you the basket privately and so on. He has some wealth. He has something that nobody else has. He has something better than any basket in the village. Now, if that guy who made the trade is a Democrat, he's going to put that basket on a rock and hand it down to his children until it eventually dissolves. But if the guy who made that trade is a Republican, he will say, wait a minute. I just traded one of my spears for one of these baskets, and everybody wants the basket. So, if I get up earlier tomorrow and I stay up later, I'll be able to make an extra spear more than I would have needed during the course of the week. An extra spear. I'm going to work harder than I need to in order to produce an extra spear which I can trade for another basket. Then I'll have two baskets. And then it dawns on him. His daughter's not going to starve after all. Her son-in-law, the idiot, can make the spears and he can supervise. And that's exactly what he does. And so he now has 4 or 5 villagers making these top quality spears. And once a month, they go down to the Midlands, and it turns out that somebody down there by the ocean has done the exact same thing, and somebody down there is cranking out these terrific baskets. And they trade them. And the baskets and the spears come back. Now, the liberals will tell you that creation of wealth is evil and that somebody goes down whenever anybody goes up. But who loses here? Who loses here? Nobody. Nobody loses. The tribe up in the mountains get baskets the likes of which they would never have seen in their entire lives. They could have worked forever and never made baskets that good, ever. And as more and more of them are traded, the price goes down and more people in the hunting village get better and better baskets. Nobody loses there. And the exact same thing goes on down with the people on the side of the ocean. They get spears they never would have had before. The only thing that happens is that the guy doing the making of the extra spears has a few more shells or shiny pebbles or whatever the money is, but nobody does worse. That guy gets the benefits of his extra hard work. And yes, he's a rich man. He has 6 shiny pebbles when everybody else only has 1. But everybody in the village got something they never would have had before. And that's what happens every single day in this country. And that's what prosperity is. So let me just give you with a little bit of hope here. It's the last thing I'll say before we close tonight. Because I know a lot of you are out there looking at these giant statists who are trying to take more and more controls in Washington and right here in the State House in Tallahassee. They're trying to put more regulations and more rules and more blockage on your ability to make better spears, because they can't stand the idea that they didn't come up with the idea. They're too lazy to do it on their own. So what they want to do is get together some big guys with clubs and take some of your excess spears from you, because they're not smart enough to have made the spears on their own and they don't want to work that hard. That's how it works. But the good news is that this giant state power is on its way out and they don't even know it. Because when you really talk about deep history, there's only been 3 things that have ever happened to human beings. There's been any numbers of republics and empires and countries and diseases and plagues and wars and all this other stuff, but only 3 important things have ever happened in all of human history. The first thing that ever happened that mattered happened about 7,000 years ago in a place called Mesopotamia, which means between the rivers, right where Baghdad is today, strangely enough. And 7,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, they figured out that if you could harvest a certain kind of grass, you could grow a certain kind of grass which produced enough of these grains, which meant that instead of us having to go out and hunt and gather enough food for the day, these grasses made so much food that you could actually stay in one place. They invented agriculture. Agriculture was civilization, because if every single one of you doesn't have to go out every single morning and catch or gather enough food just for you to get through that one day, that means that one of you can go make the food for 100 of you, and the other 99 can go on and become philosophers and doctors and poets and scientists and lawyers even. All of that together. Right? That's what civilization is. Agriculture gave us civilization because it produced enough prosperity so that we all didn't have to go out and scratch for our own living every day. That's the first thing that ever happened to humanity. The second thing that ever happened to humanity, 7,000 years ago is a long time. Second thing that ever happened to humanity only happened about 300 years ago. Right around the turn of the 1800s, really started to get into full swing though. That was the Industrial Revolution. That's when somebody figured out that there was more energy available than what my muscles or the muscles of a horse could generate. The Industrial Revolution changed the world, and I can tell you how it changed the world. The richest American in the country 150 years ago, the richest American in the country, if he really wanted to show off, might come to an event like this in a carriage pulled by 8 horses. But when I go to events, and I'm nothing like the richest American, I go to events in a carriage pulled by 360 horses. That's what the Industrial Revolution did. I go to my meetings in carriages that are pulled by 360 horses. And everybody has one of those these days. The Industrial Revolution put energy at the hands of human ingenuity, and the Industrial Revolution is what changed the second big thing. Now think about this. Our Constitution and our entire system of government, as outlined by our founders, the founders were an agricultural community. They were first wave people. They were farmers. What do farmers want from a government? They want roads to go to the market. They want an army to keep those savage Canadians off of our backs, and they want a navy to make sure that King George doesn't come wanting his chickens again. Pretty much that's all. Leave us alone, give us some roads, give us some defense, and otherwise leave us alone on our farms so we can trade. But as we started to get into the agricultural era and moved into the industrial era, what does industry require? Industry requires cities. Industry requires large numbers of people living together in one place. Industry then requires that you have civic populations, and that means sanitation, public education, public transit. It means zoning laws. It means all these other things that had to come in to allow large numbers of people to live together. And it requires vertical structures. IBM, we all remember what IBM was like, right? IBM, you start in the mailroom, you work your way up, they give you a gold watch as a vice president. That's IBM, the entire year with the company. That's a second wave industrial era economy. And we no longer live in that world in America. Because 7,000 years ago, 300 years ago, 30 years ago maybe, the third big thing started to happen. And that's the information age. And normally at this point I would pull out my smartphone, but that's sitting in a car in Los Angeles. So I'll just hold up this card. You see this iPhone here? This is a product, this iPhone that I'm holding is a product of the information age. And with this little phone, right there at that table, at 9 o'clock at night, I can order steel from China. I can order steel from China. I don't have to order it through my company. I don't have to be IBM. I don't have to be anybody. I have to be a guy with a bank account and a phone. That information age economy, these young people out here understand this in their bones. They don't take orders from hierarchies because hierarchies don't exist for young people. There are no big corporations like IBM, and there is no big centralized government either. Nobody tells them what to do because they're connected to everybody else. That economy is here. And the thing that's so amazing to me, and the thing that's so remarkable, the thing that should give all of us hope is these idiots in Washington have inherited a second-generation, industrial-era, vertical kind of a government that cannot stand in a third-age economy. It cannot stand. It will not survive. It doesn't matter who wins elections. It won't survive. I'm 55 years old. When I was a kid, there were 3 networks on TV, ABC, CBS, and NBC. That's why people watched Hee-Haw, because there was nothing else on Sunday nights. There was one telephone company. If you wanted to buy a car, you had 3 choices. You could buy a Ford, a Chevy, or a Chrysler. You say that to young people today, they look at you like you're from another planet. There are hundreds of channels of entertainment. There are scores of phone companies. There are any numbers of different cars you can buy. And when every single one of these people connect with each other directly, if you think that these guys in Washington can control that, you're out of your minds. They can't. They're done. Barack Obama getting elected and re-elected, it's like watching T-Rex. And he's like T-Rex. Have you noticed the big toothy smile, the little tiny little scrawny little arms? And he's like, "Arr, arr, arr, I am the king of the world. I am the tyrant lizard." And sure enough, he is. Yes, he is. But in the sky behind him is a light that's starting to grow, and it's that light of that incoming asteroid, and that asteroid's going to blow that entire world of the dinosaurs just flat away. And all of the big, lumbering, sturdy, stupid, fossilized, slow giants are gone. And all that's going to be left are the quick-witted, fast-thinking, competitive little mammals that are filling up the space between their toes, because that wave of the third wave of information is going to come and blow all of this structure away. Structure. As America was on the rise, structure helped us. But as usual, we've gone too far. And now the structure of government is no longer promoting business, it's inhibiting business. Right? Government used to be there to enforce the rules, period. Now they're here to invent rules that have no meaning to anything. They're designed to stop you from going out and being individuals and generating some wealth out of thin air. That's what they're there for now. Because these R-selected bunny men who cannot compete and who cannot open a jackknife have to have power over those of you who can. And so they've demonized everything you believe in. And it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Because the cell phone is going to save you all in a way that you don't even realize. Because the cell phone and the smartphone is a return to everything that we started with. The cell phone means individuality. The cell phone means freedom from central authority. The cell phone means instead of going through the State Department to get a permit to buy steel from China, which I've authorized through IBM, means I make a call and the steel arrives. The people who are sitting in this room today, these young people, understand this in their bones. The future will be a menu-driven government where you will pay what you think is important and not pay for anything that you don't. And the competition of ideas will come back and we will determine what we as a group of people think we need. Yes or no? Do we need this? Yes or no? Yeah. And those of us who want it will pay for it, and those of us who don't won't. And the marketplace of ideas and this reactor of creativity will restore itself to America, and you are going to live to see it, and I am too. Wow. It's going to happen. It's happening now. It's happening in front of our eyes. And this is the one way that we K-type predators, the one way that we competition-loving people, the one way that we fit people who like to compete, who like to play by the rules. Our type people don't like rules because rules inhibit fair competition. If you can't compete, why would you abide by the rules? The only way they have to win is through cheating. Why do you think there's so much voter fraud on one side of the aisle and not on the other? Because they have to cheat to win because they can't compete. They can't compete. Now, those people, those liberals and those progressives will hear us talk about competition and they'll think, oh, you brutal, horrible, horrible, brutal people, all you're about is winning. But what they don't understand is that the real gift from competition is not winning. The gift from competition is losing. Nobody understands this. How much have you ever won in terms of personal rewards from being right and getting your way? Nothing. Everything that has ever come to you in your entire life has come to you through failure. And the understanding that playing by the rules shows us where we fail so that we will not fail there again is what enables the creation of prosperity from thin air. Because people that are okay with mediocrity are the people that have let open sewers run in every country in the third world for the last 7,000 years, and it's never going to change. The only things that ever change is when people said, this is not good enough for me. I'm tired of having an open sewer in my backyard. I'm going down to Home Depot with $200 and 4 of my friends. We're going to solve this problem forever. You applaud. You applaud because you understand it. You applaud because you're K-selected type wolves. You're a pack of wolves. You're not a herd of sheep. You cooperate. You have rules and laws. Let's just imagine as a thought experiment that we are K-selected people because humanity is K. And Americans are even more K than the rest of humanity. And conservatives are even more K than the rest of Americans. And I'm even more K than the rest of you guys. So, let's just play one little last game. Let's imagine that every one of us K-selected, pro-competition, pro-capitalism, pro-rules kind of people who invest in our children, who believe in our society and our group, our in-group. Let's say that every single one of this room, 200 people in here, let's say that we all woke up tomorrow morning on the plains of the Serengeti in the bodies of gazelles. We still had our full intellect, and we still had the ability to communicate, but all of us K-selected type people woke up in our type bodies of gazelles. Let's just say tomorrow morning we woke up on the plains of Africa, and all of us were in the bodies of gazelles. What would we do? Would we take this liberal philosophy of, well, it's morning, everybody go out there and eat. Hopefully none of you will be eaten by lions, although we know that at least some of you will be. Hopefully it won't be you today. Won't be you today. Or would we look around this room and say, okay, I need 15 of the biggest, strongest antelopes we can get up here. I want the 15 strongest gazelles with the longest horns up here on the stage right now. And up would come. And then the head gazelle would say, listen, here's how it's going to be. No more of this just going out on the plain in herds anymore. That's nonsense. If you think that those lions are going to take our kids, you're out of your minds. Never. So from now on, it's a convoy system. Strongest males on the outside, smaller and weaker males, then females, then children on the inside. We're moving as a convoy. And when we see a lion come out of the bush, instead of us all running for our individual lives, we're going to let the women and children run one way, and the rest of us strongest male gazelles are going to run right at that lion, and we're going to gore that son of a bitch till it's dead. Oh, geez, Bill, I don't know. You don't have claws, you've got hooves. It's like, I don't care how many hooves we got. We got 50 of us. 50 of us. Well, you can't outrun that lion, Bill. Well, then we can outrun the pregnant women, and we can outrun their cubs, and we'll stomp them to death too, because if there's no more lion cubs, there's no more lions. That's what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like. Because we love our children, and we love our wives, and we love our weak, and we love our old, and we're not going to let them be predated by some force of nature. We're going to stop it now. That's what it sounds like. And if you're a bunch of rabbits out on a field of open grass, no more of this walking around in the grass so the hawks can come in and swoop off some young ones or some old ones. It's a convoy. When the hawk comes down, all the strong rabbits jump on him and just claw his little eyes out with their sharp little pointy teeth, and pretty soon there are no more hawks. And then we can all live in prosperity. That's exactly what happens with civilizations. Until finally, there are no more hawks, and then there's no more need to be worried about hawks. And then everybody forgets about how to do these kind of things, and all of that selected K-type behavior goes away until finally it's nothing but open fields of grass forever, and everybody forgets everything, and everybody goes out and eats their own little bits of clover, and then the hawks come back. Then the hawks come back. We can't let it happen. We just can't. That logo is a lantern. It's a lamp. It's a flame. It's a beacon. We worry that society is changing. We worry that these massive changes are something that we can't do, but it doesn't really matter in the long run. It doesn't matter what happens in Washington. It doesn't matter what happens in Tallahassee. It doesn't matter what happens in your hometown. The only thing that matters is that you keep that fire alive in your own heart. The Bible referred to this group of people as the remnant. Maybe 1 in 10, maybe 1 in 100, doesn't matter. doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how many of us there are. It only matters that it stays alive. That's all that matters. That's all that counts. We have to remember how to do these things. We have to remember what this is all about, because when this society collapses, if we don't stop this, we are going to be the people that are going to get us to the light on the other side. We have to stay in this fight. We have to prevent it if we can. And I think we can prevent it. I think the smartphone allows us to communicate as a pack for the first time ever. But if it doesn't, we have to protect that flame in our hearts, not just for the wolves, but for the rabbits as well. They don't understand that it's their own philosophy and their own politics. It's causing the ruin of their entire lives. Do you really think that inner city kids are going to be able to outcompete kids that live on a farm if this entire world monetary supply goes away? No. Conservatives have to be here because conservatives not only want to protect conservatives, they actually want to protect liberals as well. We want to protect all of our weak and all of our old and all of our sick. We're wired that way. We're built that way. That's what K-type people do. So you have to keep that fire alive. You have to keep coming to these things, and even if you are the last person on earth, that's all that matters so long as there's one of you left. That time may not come. We hope it doesn't come. But if it does, we're going to need every single one of you. Every single one of you is worthwhile. Every single one of you is worth protecting. Every single one of you is worth saving. And every single one of you is absolutely necessary. So get out there, take that torch, and explain to Americans what prosperity is. And maybe we don't have to worry about this R stuff anymore, period, forever. Thanks for having me, and have a good night.
Did he live up to that introduction? I thought he would. We said we were going to try to do a couple Q&As. I know it's getting a little late, so we're going to try to do a couple Q&As. What did you do?
I just took a selfie with my hotel key.
Did you? Right. So all right. Does anybody have a question for Bill?
I do.
All right, up here. You're close.
Looks like we're going to pass a bill here in the legislature this time that will make the second offense of skinny dipping a third-degree felony. Your opinion?
He said that it looks like we're going to pass a bill in the legislature that's going to make the second offense of skinny dipping a third-degree felony. What's happening here? No, seriously, what's happening here? What's happening is this. What's happening is that people who have this defective gene that requires them to tell other people what to do because they can't do anything on their own have run rampant. They've run rampant. They've run out of sensible things to tell us what to do, and they get to ever more insensible and ridiculous things to tell us what to do. There was a bill in California, some of you may have heard of this situation, it's like they use carp to clean up like people's feet, some form of a pedicure where Asian carp go and just eat the dead skin but not the living skin. Banned in California. You know how many fatalities there were due to Asian carp decapitation? 0. None. It's the desire to tell people what to do. They're built this way, and they come this way, and they go to legislatures, which is why we have such poor success as Republicans. Because frankly, it's very, very hard to find a politician who will do what he said, what Slade said. Go to the government and say we want less. All politicians, including our politicians, are selected to go to the government because they're the kind of people that want to have that kind of power. And I hate to pick on him because, I'm not generally the kind of guy to kick a guy this badly, but seriously, just think about Joe Biden for a second. No, I mean it. Joe Biden travels in limousines. Joe Biden hasn't had to pay for anything in 40 years. He's never had to get his wallet out in 40 years. Joe Biden travels in a corporate jet, which is called Air Force Two, which is at least a 757 everywhere he goes. Joe Biden couldn't, not only could Joe Biden not run Walmart, Joe Biden couldn't run a Walmart. Joe Biden in the real world couldn't do any of this stuff. I don't think Joe Biden could staff a fry station at McDonald's, to be perfectly honest with you. And yet, Joe Biden has the same exact benefits that the top business mind in the country has. Better. He has personal security protection too. So what did Joe Biden have to do in order to get a lifetime of corporate jet travel and all of these perks? He had to walk a district for 6 months, one time. And after that, everything took care of itself. That's the appeal of politics. And that's why people like us don't understand politicians, because we've never understood it. It's like you're going to be a state representative. You're going to go to Washington as a representative in the House of Representatives. I can't leave my business for 2 years. I'm not going to leave my family for 2 years. I'm going to go live in Washington, for God's sakes. It's a pit. Are you serious? No. Those are the kind of people we should have in Washington, but nobody who thinks that way goes to Washington. The kind of people that go to Washington want the jets, want the perks, want all the privileges. And once they get them, they never want to leave. Never want to leave. And they don't just want power, sir. They need it. They need it. I come from Los Angeles, which is kind of like saying I just flew in from Mordor. And it's the same kind of vibe. It's different, but it's similar. When you run into enough actors and people who are driven to be movie stars, or driven, they need the applause, they need the spotlight, they're missing something. And it's a fundamental need on their part. And it's not noble and it's not good, this need to tell other people what to do. How many of you like being told what to do? And how many of you admit to like telling other people what to do? You ask young kids that today, you go to a college and say, hey, do you like telling people what to do? None of them will raise their hands. It's vile. It's a vile kind of a thing. Second offense for skinny dipping, felony, for God's sakes. And it's yet another law.
They're going to try to get the predators.
Sure, the predators. Are we having a skinny dipping epidemic that I'm unaware of here? It's like, seriously, what they're looking for, you have to understand something too about politicians. This occurred to me very late in life. If you're a legislator and you go to Washington, what's your job? What are you hired to do? Write laws. Right? Write laws. That's your job. That's what you do. And so when all the laws stopping people from murdering people and the laws requiring airlines to have a certain amount of maintenance and all the sensible laws, don't dump mercury into the Ohio River. It's a reasonable regulation for the EPA to have. But once those regulations are written, does the Congress just say, hey, nothing to do, might as well just hang out here and if something comes up, I guess we'll write a law for it, but right now there's really nothing going on. Got everything pretty much iced. No, they keep writing more laws. And since all the good laws are already taken, if you'll pardon the expression, you have to start coming up with new laws, like laws about carps and laws about skinny dipping. So they can justify their existence to the people that elected them so they can go back and get the benefits. I have been asked many times to run for office. I'm not going to do it. But I'll tell you one thing. If I did, I would like my monument to be this. I would like to have, when I'm done, in Los Angeles, let's say, I'd like there to be a giant commercial lot. And in this giant commercial lot, I'd like there to be a construction fence. And I'd like to have one of those beautiful realtor kind of, computer-generated things of this like 30-story glass office tower. And I would like it to say the William A. Whittle Office Tower Building canceled by William A. Whittle as a monument to the American people. Canceled. And just have it be an open lot where something useful like a dry cleaners could go. That's what I'd like to do. But nobody else thinks that way. If I was elected to Washington, my job would be to destroy laws. And I'd have a whole party. I'd start the Piranha Party. And the Piranha Party is very simple. Our job is to go into Washington and eat laws. Any law that doesn't make sense, we're going to destroy it. We've got a lot of work to do. As time goes by and we gain success, we'll have to start being careful. We get to things like murder. We probably want to slow down a little bit. But there's not going to be we've got a lot of stuff to destroy between now and then. Go to Washington, destroy laws.
All the way over there in the back.
Unions, where do they stand in your RK plan?
Well, unions, look, there's a place for unions in a world where environments are so harsh and conditions are so bad and capital had so much control over opportunities. You could make a case for unions in the 1800s and early 1900s and so on. You could make a case. And you can still make a case for private unions because I believe in freedom. I believe in non-coercion. I don't think you should tell anybody what to do. And if you want to get together with that guy and negotiate for a job rate, that should be your business. I can't legislate against that. It's none of my business. If 5 of you want to get together and go to the manager and say, we're going to negotiate together for benefits, fantastic. The guy should have the option to say, not interested, going to hire 5 new guys. That's how it should work. But that's not the situation in unions today. You find today in unions, it's starting to change a little bit thanks to guys like Scott Walker and so on, but it's starting to change. But, see, this is where it's fun to turn people's arguments on their heads. Union organizers will tell you that the union is the best thing that ever happened to them. Let's say they're right. I love to win arguments by granting the opposition their premise. I love to say, let's say you're right. If unions really are the very best thing that ever happened to you and your union members, then writing that union check should be the high point of your month. You should sit down and go, well, honey, we got all these bills to pay, but fortunately, I get to write a check for $80 to the union, and that's the best thing that ever happened to me. So what happens when you no longer automatically deduct union dues from paychecks but allow people to write checks on their own? Union membership drops by 80%. Which is a complete indication of the lie of most union workers. The 20% that still is in there are the people that want to control other people's money. Period. They want to control other people's money. And ultimately, unions are kind of non-competitive. Unions at their worst, when you get into things like the Auto Workers Union and GM, where GM was losing $1,500 on every car that they sold, they really were. Ultimately, when you looked at the American auto industry, it's changing for the better a little bit now. There's a big victory in Tennessee with the Volkswagen thing, an enormous victory. If you look at what happened in Tennessee, what you found was the unions were going in and basically saying to these guys, you could do less work for more money. And what they said at the Volkswagen plant blew my mind. It just blew my mind because we don't hear this anymore. I identified with it instantly. The guy, the spokesman for the anti-union cause at the Volkswagen plant in Tennessee said, I work for Volkswagen and we make great cars. He didn't say they make great cars. He said we make great cars. He understood that there was a relationship between labor and management where they're both pulling on the same team, on the same rope, in the same direction, and that what was good for management was good for the workers. We make great cars here at Volkswagen in Tennessee. No wonder the union couldn't get a piece of them. They had pride in themselves. They had pride in their work. And that pride probably existed because the management was bright enough, it shouldn't be bright, it should be obvious, to include the workers in the compensation. That's how I would run a company if I was running a big company. We all win or we all lose, right? One last thing let me just say about employees, and that's this. So many people out there look at people like you who own businesses and go, wow, it must be nice to have a really big house and a nice car and stuff. It is nice. What's not nice is being the first person in and the last person out. And what's not nice is, while you're out there watching a football game with your paycheck in your pocket, which you know is going to be there, I have to stay up and say, well, what part of my expenses in my personal family can I cut so I can make payroll this week? That they don't know. And what employees also don't know is, yeah, okay, if we make more money, we get more, but if we make less money, do you go home with less? Do I pay you less if our sales are down? No. Being an employee is a ratchet, right? You trade security for limited amounts of fluctuation. I'm going to give up the big win and the big loss against security, a regular paycheck. I've been an employee for most of my life. I'm now a business owner. Oh, God. So much nicer to be in. So much easier being an employee. Yeah, my phone's in the car. I'm probably out of business by the time I get back. But it's not all gravy. Nobody sees the downside. Nobody sees the sweat. Nobody sees the worry. And we need to start telling people. We need to explain to them what prosperity is.
This will be the last one, Norm.
Thank you, Bill. I like your long view of things, but I'm scared that we're watching our country, our culture, our constitution, our way of life being disassembled right before our eyes. And there's a certain point when Humpty Dumpty can't be put back together again.
Says who?
We got a pack of wolves over here who have a religion requiring them to want us dead. And there's real physical dangers in our survival.
When you say the pack of wolves, are you talking about progressives, or are you talking about like no? I'm serious. No, who are you? Because look, there are external threats to this country. Russia has always been a threat to this country. Never had any doubts about Russia at all. You don't have that kind of alcoholism in a country unless these people are fundamentally miserable and wanting other people's stuff. You don't have people dying, I'm serious, you don't have people dying at age 60. The average life expectancy in Russia for a Russian male is 60. In America, it's 80. Statistically, that's 2 standard deviations. It's astonishing difference. Astonishing difference. The reason they're dying of alcoholism at 60 in Russia is because they want something that somebody else has. All of the K-selected competitors have been selected out of that environment. If you wanted to start a business, to the gulag with you. If you thought that the commissar was doing a bad job, to the execution wall with you. All the people that learned how to compete, people who were good at making things and doing things, were just exterminated out of the society. It's a nation of rabbits. It's a nation of passive people with a very small group of extremely fierce and brutal warriors who are given the very best of this much, much worse society in order to do the bidding of those up in charge. And when you see socialists come to power, guys like Fidel and guys like Lenin and guys like Stalin and guys like Pol Pot, they come from the mines and they come from the fields and they come from the people and they represent the will of the people. But once they're in power, they never go back to the mines and they never go back to the fields and they never go back to any of that stuff. They live in the best houses and they run things like they're kings. And that's happening here. Because in order for people who can't compete to succeed, they have to use coercion. They have to use the stick. And not to put too fine a point on it, but I think the reason we're doing so badly and they're achieving so many successes is because I think they understand our psychology so well and we don't understand theirs at all. Because we compete, we have rules. And following the rules is important to us. Not just important to us, it's essential to us. I don't know if anybody in this room will disagree with me here, but I would much, much rather lose fairly by the rules than win by cheating. Absolutely I would. It's intolerable to me. Because I can learn something. But these people just see that ethos as a tremendous opportunity for them because they know they can't compete with us one-to-one. They know they're not as fit as we are. So they use our weakness, which they see as weakness, this ability to follow the rules and follow the laws. And frankly, folks, the reason Obama's running away with all this stuff is because when it's all said and done, we turn to each other and we go, well, he was elected. He was elected, right? It's the rules. We're limited by the rules. We're incapacitated by the rules. Yeah, he was elected. What can we do? Nothing. They understand how we think. The reason I'm not as worried as you are is when all is said and done, what they do using force, legislative force, military force, police force, state force, using force to make other people do what they cannot do themselves is an indication of their unfitness and their weakness as individuals. And I'll take a wolf out of 100 rabbits any day. You give me 5 wolves and you can have 5,000 rabbits. I'm serious as I can be. We have the ability to do what needs to be done. We like to defend ourselves. We can make things. We know how to fix things. If something breaks down, we can change a tire. That kind of thing. You know, when I was in LA, I had my car wouldn't start. We got a guy come by from AAA, a 300-pound black guy named Eddie. Lovely man, genuinely lovely guy. And all the cars are parked in underground parking. And so when the car wouldn't start, we opened the gate and I said, Ed, do you want me to push and you steer and push? Or do you want me to steer and push and you push? He said, you steer and push. So we pushed it back out to the street, pushed it about 50 yards up to the back of the truck. And as he's hooking up the hooks, he says to me, hey, I really want to thank you for helping me to push. And I said, what am I going to do? I'm just going to sit there and watch you? He said, everybody else does. This is true in Los Angeles. I said, come on, Eddie. He said, no, everybody else does. I find that hard to believe, pal. He says, I go out, Bill. We're friends instantly, right? Because I helped him push my own car. He says, I go out 4 times a day in Los Angeles to change tire for grown men who don't know how or don't want to get their hands dirty. That's what's happening to America. This R kind of thing is happening, right? But I can change a tire. I'm more fit than a guy who can't, assuming life is a giant roadway. And all of the other things that I know how to do and take pride in doing make me a more capable person. I didn't get to be more capable because I had rich parents. I didn't get to be more capable because I'm white. I didn't get to be capable because anything. I got to be more capable because I work hard. And people like that are always going to be a threat to people like that. And that's why I'm not worried. Well, that's takers. We all look different, we sound different, we have different last names, different religions, different everything, but the one thing we have in common is the most important thing, and that is we had the same motivation to come here. And that motivation is to live the American dream. There's no Swiss dream. There's no Argentinian dream. There's only the American dream. Because it's the only country based on a dream. It's the only country that's based on an idea. There is an American dream. And the American dream is pretty simple. Leave me alone, but give me a chance to work hard and try my best, and give me the freedom to succeed or fail on my own. That's the American dream. And the American dream isn't to become a millionaire or a billionaire and travel around in a jet. The American dream is to work hard enough as a guy who's opened a dry cleaning store, or as a teacher, or a guy in construction, just hard enough so that he can have his own little piece of sovereignty, his own little country called his house, where he can sit out in the backyard and he can watch the Gators play the Seminoles, and he can be left alone. Left alone. And that backyard is his kingdom. It's not somebody else's kingdom, it's his. We, all of us, have come here to America so that instead of coming from one kingdom ruled by King George or Emperor this or Shah that or Sheikh this, we all came from kingdoms to come to a place where we could have our own kingdom. That's what the American dream is all about. It's a dream of our own kingdom, our own little house, our own little property, our own little lives. That's what being an American is all about. And what's so amazing about this is that it creates a society that is in fact a reactor. It's a reactor of human creativity. Because two things are going on in America, in constant stress and in constant motion. That's why we come up with everything, you know. That's why we invent virtually everything. Virtually everything of magnitude was invented here. I know it sounds chauvinistic, just happens to be true. You know, there's 6 flags on the moon. They're all American flags. By the way, has anybody seen that new Cadillac ad, which is absolutely fantastic? There's a guy in the Cadillac ad. So I haven't felt so good about America as I have in 5 years, I think, watching that ad. But if you haven't seen it, this guy basically says, yeah, Europeans think we're crazy. That's fine. We don't care, you know. Where they think we were crazy when we went to the moon. We went to the moon. You know what we got when we got there? Bored. We have a car on the moon. We left the keys in it. You know why? Because we're the only ones going back up there. That's why. That kind of thing. Right? That kind of thing. But it's a reactor of creativity. It's a reactor. And the way the reactor works is the way that any thermonuclear reactor works. Now, you've all seen thermonuclear reactors. Well, it's overcast now, but if it were clear, you could see thousands of them. Stars are thermonuclear reactors. And America is a star. America is a star. It's a thermonuclear reactor of creativity. All stars are in balance. They're opposed by 2 different forces. One force is trying to blow the star apart, and the other force is trying to shrink the star together. And America's built exactly the same way. It's in a state of balance between these 2 forces. So, what are the forces of creativity that try to blow America apart? Well, as it turns out, it's our diversity, right? It's our difference of opinion. This flag does not represent uniformity. It does not represent a state assigned by the federal government. The entire purpose of this flag is so that we can all sit together and civilly disagree. When you hear somebody calling for unity, when you hear somebody calling for uniformity, when you say somebody, we should all get behind this idea, that's un-American. The entire idea of being an American is to say, I'm an individual, I have my own opinions about things, I think this is a terrible idea, what do you think? And we can argue about these things, and through this reactor of disagreement, we can find the best possible outcome. Which is why things like Obamacare and Common Core are so awful. Because they take away competition, choice, conflict, argument, all of these things that get us the best possible outcome, and instead say that some pointy-headed guy who lives 3,000 miles away with an IQ of 108 and a certificate someplace thinks he's smarter than 300 million people who are constantly disagreeing about things. It's madness. It's nuts. Intellectualism, the kind of intellectualism that comes to us from Washington, is profoundly moronic. You have to be an idiot to be stupid enough to believe that 1 or 2 or 10 guys sitting in Washington know what's better for the country than 300 million people in real time in local conditions. It's ridiculous. And God bless you, Marco Rubio, wherever you may be. So we have this outward force of disagreement, and we're supposed to disagree. Do you know that the entire idea of the individual did not exist before America? That America was created out of whole cloth by the founding fathers to be a home to the individual? We take it for granted today. Who are you? Well, I'm John Davidson, and I have a company that does this in Orlando. This never existed in human history before, ever. Prior to the invention of the individual, which was a product of the Age of Reason, prior to the homes of the individual, which is the United States of America, Americans for prosperity, before there was a home for individuals, there were no individual people. There were the masses. There were the subjects. They were the great unwashed. They were just a herd of people who had no say, no individuality, nothing. Their job was to bring their chickens and their cattle in and give them to the king and fight for him in his wars when it was necessary. They were just the masses. The entire idea of an individual common person who had a life that they wanted to live and had aspirations of their own, it's revolutionary. It's never happened before. That's what's so amazing about America. And Thomas Jefferson did two really interesting things when he wrote this little document. As you probably know, the Obamacare document is up to the ceiling. This is the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. It's the owner's and operator's manual for 300 million of the most unruly people in the world. And as my absolute idol P.G. O'Rourke once wrote, this little document that teaches 300 million of the most unruly people in the world how to operate is about a quarter the length of the owner's manual for a Toyota Camry. It's pretty simple, really. But when Thomas Jefferson was writing the Declaration of Independence, he did two really interesting things. He put the fundamental values that we believe in are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Wow. Think about that. That's a subject of a king who wrote that. A man who knew he was going to be hanged if he was caught. The entire purpose of what we're doing is to provide a place where the pursuit of happiness could live. That's astonishing. And what's even more astonishing in its own way is what he left out, because the Virginia Charter that he based the Declaration of Independence on originally said, as many people in the Age of Enlightenment said, that our primary virtues should be life, liberty, and property. That's what it was originally, life, liberty, and property. When they read that, they must have thought, John Adams must have said some kind of typo here. Life, liberty, and property. But why is that important? Why is property important? Because property is demonized by the left in every single form. Every movie you see, the bad guy is a businessman, or he's a rich guy, he's a guy who's amassed property. Property